Zalkin, a partner in the Quantuma restructuring and insolvency team, interviews experts from the Airline Management Group to take an in-depth look at what is happening in the aviation sector, looking at its short-term and long-term prospects. In this video, the team moves its focus onto the supply chain, covering what the impact will be on airports, OEMs, airline suppliers, and the travel industry ecosystem as a whole.
Do you think the whole tourism industry will undergo fundamental change in terms of long-haul travel, destinations and reasons for travel?
Well, inevitably, there's a downward curve at the moment, so the answer to that is yes. But I think critically is how you come out of that. I can see the infrastructure of the airline industry, and by that I mean the hotels, the resorts, long haul are going to go through a significant change, I would have thought, over the next 6 months, or at least until such time, and we haven't yet mentioned it until in detail, and that is if there's a vaccine, then presumably all our problems go away. That's the theory. But I think the fundamental issue of the structure of the airline remains, so that it comes back to consumer confidence. Yes, of course there's going to be an impact, but picking up the point that Regis just mentioned, and that is the structural change within the airline industry. One of the things that from both the consumer's perspective and from the airline point of view is that inevitably there will be changes in the way in which people use their leisure time. I don't think there will be a tailing off in terms of those people nipping down to the beach or the mountains or wherever. I think that will come back quite quickly, subject to the regulations that surround it. But I think importantly for the airline industry, and as an individual, whether you're working for your own company or indeed your own company, is the opportunity now to change your perhaps antiquated processes and procedures. And just give me 30 seconds. I have a friend of mine who's in a medical profession locally, is obviously busy working with the patients with coronavirus. But the flip side to that was that she said there is a positive side to this from their perspective, and that is that all the antiquated processes and procedures which they had been in place dictated by the management, they've had to change and had to change quickly. Otherwise, the NHS in this country would have been swapped. So I think, I can't remember who said it, but Chris will remind me because he mentioned it the other day, and that is take advantage of a crisis. So from a business point of view.
Well-known Australian.
Sorry?
It was a well-known Australian.
Yes, indeed. But I think, not to jest about it, but I think seriously that we have to think about how we're going to restructure the airline industry and all the infrastructure that surrounds that as we go forward. And people are going to be forced to change. The disruption, as AMG, we come in and disrupt companies to make them change. That disruption has happened by way of a seismic volcano, which is happening globally. So people are going to have to react. And there'll be spillages in terms of, will you use Zoom? Yes, of course you will. It seems to be very effective, efficient. The technology is improving all the time. So inevitably, that will happen. But I understand humans and the need to see people, speak to people from a business point of view, and that will gradually creep up. So the issue is, how long is this tail? And what are the financial implications for the airline industry per se, and obviously the infrastructure and the environment, the hinterland that supports that.
I'm going to... Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No, I was just going to follow on from that because there were a couple of questions which I think follows on from what Peter just said. In terms of right now being in a crisis, I think it was Mandela who said that if you're ready to join hands, then you can overcome the greatest challenges. And one of the questions was relating to, what's the service on board and how is that going to impact in-flight catering companies? What about all the suppliers to the airlines and so on? My personal opinion is because everybody is part of the same value chain, one of the greatest assets that airlines have is a massive database on customers and knowing where customers are. So in terms of a retail industry, and in-flight retail is the retail side of it, there are real opportunities to looking at that and not necessarily thinking only about delivery of product on board aircraft, especially if contact with passengers is going to be reduced. And the other question was on alliances? And do we see COVID having an impact on alliances? I think, from my perspective, we've seen the evolution of relationships between airlines from simple interline ticketing, then code-share that then went into alliances. And what we've seen growing in the last decade and more rapidly in recent years has been, beyond alliances, has been joint ventures. And I think that actually, I'm not so sure that COVID is going to change the alliance strategy. It's more the interests of which airlines are out there that are going to be able to adapt and come through this crisis, and under which joint venture scenarios they might be able to build up for the future.
Fair point.
We've only got a few minutes left, and we have so many questions we can't possibly answer all of them. There were a couple of questions that came in before the webinar started, which I'll just take one or two of those, and in fact I'll probably just take one. And if we just do a very quick sweep around the panel, you've all got sort of 30 seconds or so. Where do you see the industry in 12 months' time? So if I start, Augusto, I'll start with you.
Okay, I can probably give you a view that comes from a model that we have started building to have a look at the what is the implication of all of this. And at the moment, the view is not too rosy. It's as others have mentioned during the webinar, the summer season in the northern hemisphere is, if not at risk, is pretty much gone. So that leaves a pretty bleak picture for the next few months until the end of the year. And in fact, what we see is that every week there is a new forecast coming out that is more pessimistic than the previous one. And at the moment, at least in the medium term, we share a similar view. It's going to be a pretty steep slope to climb back for sure. In the short term.
Rigas, I'll move on to you. Just your quick summary.
Well, I'll stick my neck out. I believe that by the middle of 2021, which is, I think, the question 12 months' time, domestic traffic worldwide will be at half the levels it was in 2019. Yeah. And international longer haul traffic by the summer of 2021 will be at a quarter of the level it was in 2019.
Chris, do you want to respond to that, just for your view?
I thought I was the bear, Rigas, but that's even more bearish than I think. I think if we looked at over the next 6 months or so, I think we'll...
No, they asked for 12 months.
No, I'm going to 12 months, Rigas. But it's an intermediate period, because as you know, my shape of the recovery, or what it is, it's a reverse L or a Nike symbol or a hockey stick or whatever you want to call it, but it sort of oscillates as we go up. So 6 months is a huge range, 100% error range, 20 to 40% of what we were maybe in 6 months' time, okay? And then as we go towards 12 months, it'll be approaching 50 to 60%, and it will probably stabilize around there for a period after that. And it comes almost back to Peter's thing, and I know I've taken more than 30 seconds. It depends on the vaccine, and it depends on what is acceptable for travelers and the comfort they will have once the restrictions are lifted. And once the restrictions are lifted, my survey data suggests it's going to be 4 to 6 months before people are prepared to travel on both leisure and business.
Okay. Ben, before we come on to Peter, just your quick spin, 30 seconds, and then Peter will just help us with some closing comments.
Well, I think right now is that we're going through hell, and on the one side, and therefore you have to keep going. Where is it going to be in 12 months' time? That is the crystal ball, and I agree. We have a more bearish view for 12 months. In the immediate future, we see it taking a much longer time to pick up to where it was. But let's use this opportunity to make those fundamental structural changes so that we're greener, that we're leaner, and that we're more adaptable. And really, at the end of the day, it's Peter that really likes using it. It's not. It's those that are most adapted to change that will survive. And really, that is the thought that we need to carry forward in order to ensure that those organisations we work for are going to survive in 12 months' time.
Okay. And Peter, we've reached our allotted hour, just at the point at which I'd like to ask you to perhaps just sort of sum up what we discussed. This was about the future.
In answer to your specific question, I can see airlines rebuilding their blocks. I can see airlines have disappeared. There'll be new airlines going through their business plans. But I think the ramifications of COVID-19 will be then starting to seriously hit the infrastructure and hinterland, the tourism industry, the hotels, all that which obviously is supported by the airline industry, simply because there'll be less people travelling there. So I don't think that's been thought through. Well, I'm sure it has by those people who own those hotels. I think just to summarise, obviously I want to thank everyone on the panel and all the delegates, to you, Paul and Quantuma, for creating this situation. One of the things I've just concluded upon, and I tend to spurt these things out, is that this is an ever-changing situation. I think this will be useful, this particular panel and this event, perhaps if we were to have this in a couple of weeks' time, because things would have moved on. We would be further updated with vaccines or tests or all these things of which have significant ramifications. There may be some order in terms of the governments, but certainly the airline industry is going to go and is going through an unprecedented change. It's disastrous, it's volcanic, but I think at the end of it, from a management's point of view, we have to see that how we're going to plan our way out in such a way that we've got a semblance of an industry at the end of it.
Thank you very much. And I'll just sort of add to that. As I said, going back to my point, I'm a restructuring and insolvency professional, and across all sorts of different industries where I've seen companies fail, I've seen their trade and their assets emerge into stronger, leaner businesses that have gone on to do great things. And I have every reason to be optimistic that the airline industry undoubtedly will survive this. It will change. It will be fundamentally different. And all of the stakeholders in the industry will adapt. And I think that the industry has a lot to look forward to, albeit it's going to be a difficult journey along the way. So, but I'd like to thank all of you for your sort of really insightful thoughts and comments. It's been a really interesting session this afternoon. We've had a huge number of questions from our delegates, and we really will try to address them, and apologies that we haven't been able to address all of those questions. I agree it would be very interesting to come back in a couple of weeks' time and just see what we're thinking when things have moved on. So thank you very much to everybody, to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of our delegates. We will try to respond to you and to your questions, and we hope to be in touch with you again soon. So goodbye.
Look out for the next 3 parts in this series on the Quantuma and Airline Management Group's LinkedIn channels and websites.